Like Miss Basic said, my name is Mr. Antrim. I'm going to be teaching you guys a little about revolution. Okay guys, now with revolution, what we're going to study is the conditions which start a revolution. We're going to examine some revolutionary figures. And then at the end, you guys are going to get into some groups, and we're going to come up with current day situations that could result in revolution. Just to give you a little overview, that's what we're going to talk about. When we talk about revolution, we have to understand a certain couple of things. What a revolution is. So I'm going to give you a definition so you can put it into a little bit of context. A revolution is a sudden, radical, or complete change, or a fundamental overthrow or shift in a political system, meaning a government. This we're going to approach from multiple areas. Revolutions happen not only in government, but they happen in social life as well. So I've chosen 5 famous people from history, and we're going to talk about the context in which they are revolutionary, the conditions that led them to become the outstanding people of history that we know them to be. All right. Does anybody know who?
I know that.
Who's that?
Cesar Chavez.
Cesar Chavez.
Okay.
Okay. Fair enough.
Learned about him in history.
Okay, now this is Cesar Chavez. All right, for those of you that don't know or aren't as blessed to, what's your name? Ricardo. Aren't as blessed in your historical knowledge of California figures as Ricardo. Cesar Chavez, if any of you have ever been to the Central Valley in California, it's where most of your agricultural products come from. And Cesar Chavez is incredibly important in organizing the farm workers. Okay? So if you've ever been to Central California during the summer, it's hot. It's really hot, like 100 degrees, sun's beating down on you, no clouds, no wind, no water, no nothing. It's really hot, it's really desolate, and it's really lame. So if you can imagine yourself in the position of a migrant worker, you probably don't speak English, you're working for far under minimum wage, you're an undocumented worker, you know, you spend all day in the sun picking grapes, and this is really important because Cesar Chavez said, this is not fair. Why are we treating our migrant farm workers like slaves or indentured servants? Now, what he did in the city of Delano, organized the Filipino farm workers, and they had a strike. Okay, now if anybody doesn't know what a strike is, it's where all the workers get together and say, we're not going to work, we're not going to do anything, we're going to halt production until you give us what we want. What the grape workers were looking for was fair conditions. They were looking for fair pay and fair treatment. And so Cesar Chavez, who started a National Farm Workers Association, they had a strike. They said, we're not going to pick any grapes. You guys are going to get your grapes from somewhere else because we're not going to do it because this is slave labor. And so they marched all the way from Delano to Sacramento. Now this happened, this strike happened for 5 years. So 5 years of not working. Can you imagine like trying to support a family or live or pay rent or eat without working for 5 years? It's pretty tough. You really have to be committed. That should give you a little bit of a perspective of what it's like all to get the state commission and the federal commissions on labor to pay attention to them. Eventually, the United States Senate had a subcommittee meeting on public welfare and migratory labor. In 1970, the United Farm Workers, which was the changing organization from the National Farm Workers Association to the United Farm Workers to be more unilateral. Give us a break every 6 hours. Let us take 5 minutes, sit down, have some water. It resulted in the California Labor Regulations Act, which enabled the migratory farm workers to unionize. Now, the power of unions is that you have representatives that can talk to congressional and Senate representatives, both at the state and federal level, and lobby for you. Now, lobbying is going and speaking about your interests. So, what we call collective bargaining rights, strength in numbers. Now, Cesar Chavez was the man that was really the muscle behind all this, the brains behind it, organizing everybody and getting them to fight together for a common goal. Does anybody know who this guy is?
George Washington.
Yeah. All right. Nobody knows who he is. All right, well, he's the guy on the $1 bill. George Washington, our first president. Here's a picture of him crossing the Delaware River. All right, so this is, everybody knows who George Washington is. He's the big guy. He's the first president. Does anybody know why?
He's a beast.
Wasn't he like the leader of the Revolutionary War or something?
He was the commanding officer, the commander-in-chief of the First Continental Army. Okay?
Oh, that.
You just jumped to the end of my slide. Good job.
Oh, sorry.
No, hey, good move. You have been paying attention. Okay, now what led up to the American Revolution? The French and Indian War, okay? So we were British colonies. So they said, look, you're ours. We're going to tell you what to do. So we've got this little country to the north of us called Canada. And then we had these other people that the British hated as well. The Indians, or Native Americans. The British said, look, you you go fight them for us. We'll give you guns, we'll give you uniforms, but just take care of them. We don't really want to deal with this. This made a couple of Americans very successful for their military conquest. George Washington being one of them. The Sugar Act in 1764. The British imposed a tax on coffee, sugar, and they said no rum and no wine coming from France. We're going to tell you what you can have, but if you want it, you're going to pay us for it. So this is really where you get the idea of taxation without representation. Has anybody heard that before?
Yes.
All right. 1765, the Stamp Act. Anything you want to do. You want to buy land? You wanted to open a business? You want to publish a newspaper? You want to get married? You want to do any of this kind of stuff, you had to have paperwork. You had to have licenses. So the British came up with this brilliant idea that every official document has to have a little stamp on it. It says, approved by the British Crown. This is the Stamp Act. That's where we get Patrick Henry's famous speech, give me liberty or give me death. Give me freedom or just kill me, because it isn't worth living without it. March 5th, 1770, the Boston Massacre. And the British soldiers opened fire on them. Shot them. Seems kind of like gang warfare of today. In secret in 1774, and then again after the Revolutionary War started in 1775, the well-to-dos, the intellectuals, the landowning men of the colonies got together to fight back. They had these private meeting to discuss crazy ideas like the Declaration of Independence or the Articles of Confederation. They also formed the Colonial Army, which they said, look, who's going to lead this thing? We got this war hero right here. He's strong, he's motivated, he fights with his troops. So they named him general. They said, look, you're the commander-in-chief. You tell us what to do. We'll give you the men if you make them fight. Now after this, the British are really mad. They're really ticked off. You're meeting in secret. You're trying to overthrow our power there. You're fighting back violently with a huge loss of life against the laws that we're trying to do. So they said, fine, we're going to send our warships. We're going to send our troops. And we're going to teach you how to behave. Well, we knew this was coming. We knew this was going to happen because you can only poke somebody so long before they slap you. And so they sent all these warships. And we saw them coming. So everybody know who Paul Revere is?
Mm-hmm.
The British are coming. One if by land, two if by sea. All right. They can warn the messengers to go spread the word. Get the Continental Army ready because they're here. We don't have GPS. We didn't have satellites. We didn't have radar or anything like that. This was a guy with really good eyesight. The famous shot heard around the world. The Revolutionary War began in Lexington. Okay, does anybody know who this is? Lenin. All right. And who is Lenin?
Russian.
No, that's Leno. Big chin, really funny, lots of cars. Okay, Che Guevara. Anybody know who this guy is? All right. Well, if anybody's aware of the Motorcycle Diaries? No? The movie came out a little bit ago? Okay, Che Guevara was an Argentinian. He was a very intelligent man. He went to medical school and became a doctor in Argentina. And in order to connect with his brothers, now he hopped on a little motorcycle with his buddy, and they said, all right, we're going to ride from here to the end of the continent. Forget that. We're going to ride through South America. We're going to ride through Central America. We're going to go up to Mexico. We're going to see what it's like. Now, in traveling all the way from the Southern Hemisphere to the Northern Hemisphere, he started to notice some things. Incredible poverty, horrible conditions that his fellow man was going through. Now this, in that time, there were a couple of ideas flying around. Marxism, maybe. Leninism, communism. The idea that your fellow man should not be measured by his possessions and that there should be collective ownership. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is his involvement with another nation and their fight for independence. Anybody know where Cuba is? Yep. All right, well, it's kind of a rhetorical question. But, all right, so Cuba had just undergone a military coup, which is where somebody in the military, usually a general, says, look, I've got all these soldiers. This government isn't doing anything. I bet with all these guys, I could just seize power. Well, General Batista did that in 1952. Okay? So he dissolved the government and said, you know what? No rights for anybody. Parliament, you're gone. 1954, he disbanded Parliament, making himself the constitutional president. Now this outraged the Cuban people because of the horrible